Hi everyone, welcome back to video 2 from the Freelancer Shift. I'm Jennifer. I'm glad to have you here with me today. This video is going to discuss how freelancers get paid and understanding business structures. So when you're working a traditional job, at least in the US, you're usually hired as an employee and you get paid on a W-2. Your employer withholds taxes from your paycheck, handles things like employment insurance and other benefits like healthcare and retirement plans. On the other hand, when you are a freelancer, you are generally considered self-employed, which means you aren't on the regular company payroll and you don't get those same benefits or protections that you do as a W-2 employee here in the US. Instead, you usually get paid on a 1099, which is how companies report payments made to independent contractors. So I know that when I learned this years ago, I had a lot of questions, and I'm sure that you do too. Like, how do you actually get paid? Do you need to register a business? What do I do about taxes? And what's the difference between W-2 and 1099 again? These are all great questions, and today I want to tell you a little bit about how I got started, how I handled payment and taxes, and how things evolved as my business grew. Now, just a heads up before we get into it, I am definitely not a tax expert or attorney. I've learned a lot through experience, and I've worked with a certified public accountant or CPA to make sure that I'm doing things right. But I still feel like there is value in sharing what's worked for me. But still, definitely do your own research and talk to a professional who knows your specific situation. Well, let's get started with what defines a freelancer, which mostly comes down to how much control the company has over the way you work. So if a company sets your hours, directly supervises how you do the work, provides all of the tools and equipment that you need to do your work, and requires you to only work for them, then you are likely classified as an employee being paid on a W-2. But if the company lets you set your own schedule, work independently, requires that you use your own tools, and allows you to have multiple clients, you're probably classified as an independent contractor and paid on a 1099. For example, as a learning specialist who works as a freelancer or independent contractor, one thing that people don't always realize is that I'm also responsible for purchasing most of the tools and software that I use to do my job. It's part of the cost of doing business with my clients, and I factor that into the cost when I determine my rate. But in a traditional job, my employer would likely provide licenses for the tools that I use to create learning materials and courses. Things like Articulate, Camtasia, Canva Pro, or stock photo libraries. But as a freelancer and proud business owner, these costs generally fall on me. But if you're just starting out, don't feel like you need to worry about every tool at once. I started small and added tools as I took on more complex projects and higher paying clients. Now, in the US, the IRS has guidelines about whether a company should classify someone as an employee or a freelancer. And granted, some companies do misclassify workers. So it's worth you doing your research and having an understanding of how you should be classified. But in general, freelancers and self-employed professionals are paid by a 1099. So to tell you about how I have evolved since I first started freelancing, I have to go way back. Years ago, when I was a college student, I started freelancing as a fitness instructor. I was young and I didn't know anything about freelancing, so I didn't have any kind of formal business set up. I taught classes at different gyms and studios, and none of them hired me as an employee. I was independent, working on a class-by-class basis, trying to get some money to put me through college. So instead of getting paid as a W-2 employee, at the end of the year, I received 1099s from each fitness studio that paid me over $600. So I learned at that time that it was really important for me to track my income, track my expenses, because there are some expenses that are tax deductible. Again, you'll have to check with your certified financial planner to get to know more about those. And probably most importantly, save and pay my own taxes, because when you're being paid on a 1099, the company isn't taking taxes out for you. That means you have to pay those taxes on your own later on. I know a lot of people who've entered into freelancing, getting paid on a 1099, who did not account for those expenses as they were getting paid, and they ran into problems when the payment was due because they ended up owing money that they didn't allot for. So that is definitely something to be cautious about. But back then, I didn't have a business structure. I was just working under my own name. Then, several years later, I opened my own yoga and Pilates studio, which at the time I registered as a sole proprietorship. Honestly, if I could go back, I probably, knowing a little bit more now, would register it as an LLC. That's my personal decision. I was obviously able to register it as a sole proprietorship, and I had the business for many years, so that worked for me. With a sole proprietorship, I wasn't creating a separate legal entity. I was just doing business as, basically. So I could operate under the studio name instead of just my personal name. At the time, I did this honestly because I didn't know any differently. It was affordable, it was easy to set up, so it was quick, and it got me up and running fast. But legally, there was no separation between me and the business, meaning if anything went wrong, I could be personally liable. With that said, I did know that because I did research sole proprietorships at the time. So I did obtain insurance for the business to protect me in case something went wrong. I also lived in a state where I was able to declare a homestead exemption to protect my home. So I also did that. At the time, that risk felt manageable and the simplicity worked for me. But fast forward to just a few years ago, I established my learning and consulting business. And I decided to set it up as an LLC, which is a limited liability company. I did this because forming an LLC gave me a more professional structure. I get to have LLC at the end of the business name. A clearer separation between my business and my personal finances. I have a separate business bank account. And it also gives me a level of liability protection in case anything goes wrong. I learned that creating an LLC was also pretty easy. I did have to complete some paperwork that I had to file with the state that I live in, and I had to pay a registration fee, which I believe was about $500. It's each year that you pay it. For the state I live in, I think it's different from state to state, but again, I'm not sure. And then I have to submit an annual report to stay in compliance, but the annual report is very simple. And once you do one, you can basically copy it into the next year report if nothing about your business has really changed as far as the services that you're offering. Now, even though I'm an LLC, I'm still a single member LLC. So my business income gets reported on a Schedule C, and that is part of my personal tax return. And yes, I do get 1099s from various clients that I work with when I do freelance work. Understandably, this may be very confusing, and you likely have more questions, which is okay. This video wasn't intended to give you all of the answers. It was intended to tell you what I've learned through my experiences and hopefully provide you enough knowledge to go to an expert with some well thought out questions on what is best for you in your freelance business. Because again, I am not a CPA or an attorney. I worked with an accountant to figure this out, and I encourage you to talk to someone who can help you make the best decision for you. If you've enjoyed this content, I'm releasing 1 to 2 videos every week packed with freelance tips to help you thrive on your own terms. We will cover a variety of topics that is relevant to people who are entering or working in the freelance industry. So hit that follow and subscribe button if you're ready to make freelancing work for you on your own terms. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.